Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar in our CSA webinar series, Community Supported Agriculture and Food Security. My name is Emily. I'm the engagement coordinator with Farm Folk City Folk. And thanks for being here with us tonight. I'd like to begin this evening by acknowledging that I am joining this call from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We have people joining us today from across BC. So I invite you all to acknowledge in your own way the traditional caretakers of the lands that you are currently on. I'd also like to acknowledge that the work that we do at Farm Folk City Folk within the colonial borders of British Columbia promotes a food system that was not traditionally adopted by many of these nations. So while we promote our colonial introduced system as a sustainable and environmentally sensitive approach to food production, it's critical to recognize that many of these communities still rely on their traditional food systems and continue to be put at risk by agricultural and industrial development. And it's important that we promote the protection of these food systems as a part of our work. So as we talk about strengthening CSA programs and local food security this evening, I invite you all to consider how we can support Indigenous communities working to protect their food systems and take collective ownership for dismantling the barriers that keep Indigenous communities from having reliable access to good and culturally relevant food. Tonight's webinar is hosted by Farm Folk City Folk, BC's oldest and largest food and agriculture nonprofit, where we work to connect, empower, and inspire people to strengthen BC's food systems. And we do that through a variety of programs like this Strengthening Community Supported Agriculture program. Coe Taylor, the communications coordinator at Farm Folk City Folk, is also here with us to help out. And as I said earlier, this is the last webinar for this series. So if you missed the previous webinars, you can find the recordings on our website through the links that Coe is going to be dropping in the chat box. We are joined also by a couple of awesome farmers who are going to be speaking. So I will just introduce those two. Jacob from Tea Creek Farm is here with us. Thanks for the wave, Jacob. Tea Creek catalyzes new agricultural projects and livelihoods, restoring the ability of Indigenous nations to grow fresh, healthy food and medicine for themselves and their communities. Tea Creek's Indigenous-led program works in partnership with First Nations proponents to build a sustainable economy and long-term food sovereignty. Jacob is the recipient of the BCAF Indigenous Business Award and was founder and president of Copper Moon Communications and VP Communications for the Castleman Group. He has consulted with over 60 First Nations on strategy, community engagement, and economic development. Karen is also here with us from Farmers on 57th. Since 2009, Karen has been co-creating Farmers on 57th, a not-for-profit organization that grows food and flowers on the former lawns of a Vancouver Coastal Health long-term care facility. Farmers on 57th creates opportunities for people to grow their own food through volunteer and horticultural therapy programs, community garden plots, and a grow your own food course. Karen is also the interim executive director of the Vancouver Urban Farming Society, where she works to support the growth of farming in the city. So I imagine that we are all pretty familiar with Zoom at this point, and probably I'm gonna say some things that you've heard numerous times already, but I just would like to let everyone know that this event is being recorded and will be up on our website in the future. And during the presentations, if you could just please keep yourself muted to help eliminate any background noise, that would be great. As well, I invite you to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable doing so, especially during our Q&A. And if you are having any issues with Zoom, hearing someone needing to change which mode you see everyone in, just reach out in the chat and hopefully Coe can help you out with that. And so now I'm just going to pass it off to Karen. So Karen, feel free to unmute yourself and share your screen with us.
Thank you for the reminder to unmute. That's always the thing that happens. So, okay, and now I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, and yeah, thank you so much, Emily, and I'm really happy to be here and invited by Farm Folk City Folk to talk about food security. My pictures are just loading up here. They'll come in a second. So I am going to talk about, Farmers on 57th, what we do here in Marpole, South Vancouver. I'll talk about how I think some of our programs contribute to food security in certain ways, and then talk specifically about our CSA program and how that might address food security in some ways and maybe not in others. But I first wanted to talk about why I got into what I'm doing here. 2 decades ago, I took a degree in environmental studies, and I found it to be quite depressing learning about the ecological crises that was, in existence already 2 decades ago, and then slowly seeing a slow turn of the ship, if at all. And I came to food just as a, something that we all do 3 times a day, me sometimes 5. I have snacks with my kids, and it's just a way that touches each of us. And it has such a big role to play in changing how we interact with not only our food, but also all the ecology that supports the growth of that food. So really a big desire to connect people to soil and to the food that grows in our bioregion out of that living soil that's just full of life and organisms that we can support if we're open to learning more about them and really promoting that living soil biology. So I feel like my concern around food security comes from that environmental perspective and that long-term desire to see a sustainable agriculture that keeps us food secure for an ongoing future. So Farmers on 57. See, I was wondering if this might happen. My computer's a bit slow. So my next slide and the ones that follow, they're about the various programs that we have in at Farmers on 57th. So one of our big programs is Garden Club. Not sure why it's not working. There we go. And it's actually the reason we're on the grounds of Vancouver Coastal Health at all. So we call it a 1-acre farm on the grounds of George Pearson Center. It's a 27-acre property. Not many more of them exist in the city. And you can see the big long lawns that we've since converted to our farm operation. But the reason we're there is because the residents were really keen when our founder, Jen Rashley, came and suggested that they might want to start some food growing programs on their very own lawns outside their bedroom windows. They were totally up for doing that. Many of the residents of George Pearson grew up with gardens at home, really know the value of fresh grown food and don't have great access to that in their hospital bedrooms and through the cafeteria food they get. So in this program, they work with volunteers to plant out garden beds. And a big part of the Garden Club program is how to transform the food coming out of the gardens into food that the residents can eat. It's a running theme through many of our programs is how do you take the food that's grown locally and seasonally and that maybe not a ton of people are used to eating, and how do you transform those into meals that can be shared and enjoyed. So this is a picture of a monthly community kitchen program happening pre-COVID. It's one of the ways the residents get at least one home-cooked meal a month and from the food that they grow in their very own gardens. And then we've also got a smoothie program that would run in normal times where folks that are even on straw diets that aren't able to participate in the community kitchen program, at least these folks can drink their veggies and get that really amazing intake. So another one of our 4 programs I'm going to talk about tonight is Growing Eden. It's a satellite garden for us. It's 8 garden beds in a city park. We moved it off the grounds of George Pearson Center to where the people that were really benefiting from that program live, and that happens to be more Southeast Van. The program's open to folks recently arrived to Vancouver, usually from out of country, and they come to us through the family place as people looking for some community and really interested in learning what grows here, many of them coming from their own gardening backgrounds in their home countries. And so that a big part of our educational work with people is just really telling them, you know, what are the best things that grow here for your best success, so they can get the most out of their efforts. And then another element of this program, again, is an outdoor community kitchen where these families, mostly moms with their kids, come together to cook meals and share the food together. And it inevitably leads to conversations around how people like to prepare their foods. And the following week, a mom will come with their own recipe to share with the group, and a cultural exchange of how we can prepare these foods in different ways that are culturally relevant to people. So those programs, Garden Club, Growing Eden, they're funded. And then a big part of what we do at Farmers on 57th, and where we gain most of our revenues, are through our Grow Your Own Food course and our Market Garden CSA. So folks that are able to join this class, they pay $300 for basically to be handheld through their first, what might be their first growing season. They get a plot of land, and they attend 12 educational sessions where we basically help them through crop planning all the way through to how to eat the food that they're growing. And sorry, you know, Emily, I did not set a timer, so if you want to let me know when I'm at my time, it's not counting my minutes. So, so what we found from this program is we also have a lot of folks that have gardened for many years join our course, and they maybe they've been growing using Miracle-Gro, and they want to learn how to do things more ecologically. So they'll join our class, and often people will have multiple growing sites. So what they do at our site, then they take home to their backyard garden or their community garden plot. We've also had groups go and start new gardens. So we're helping people just really get comfortable with how to grow successfully, and we're seeing gardens spring up all around the city as a result. So this is our market garden, and the main output of this market garden is it supports a 70 family member CSA. And we grow really intensively on two lawns, about a ½ acre in total. And that food gets grown by a team of majority volunteers. We have about 20 volunteers this year, supported by our part-time staff. And people just want to come and grow with us. They learn small scale agriculture skills. We do really intensive rotations of our crops, and so folks are learning how to prep those beds, put the seeds in the ground, and watch them grow through the season. Our volunteers are with us from March all the way through to October, and our CSA members come on board starting in June. They come for 20 weeks, pick up their weekly box of veggies. It averages out to a $32 value per week. This is one of our typical CSA boxes in the early spring, so lots of green stuff coming out of the ground at that time. And the way I just wanted to finish off talking about the CSA is to share some of our member survey results that we got in 2020, because I think it's interesting in terms of food security and who's accessing our produce. But just to point out that one of the questions we asked was if people felt that they ate more vegetables as a result of being part of the CSA. The Canada Food Guide suggests, like, nutritionally, we could all really benefit from about half of what we eat being fruits and vegetables. And 80% of the people in our CSA said that they increased their intake of vegetables being a part of our program. We also asked people what their household income was last year. It's the first time we asked them, and interesting to see to me that there are representatives from all the different income brackets. Clearly, yeah, 25% are in an upper income bracket. But the follow-up question to this too was that we asked them if they felt their household spending on groceries changed as a result of being part of the CSA. About 15% said that they thought it increased, but 40% of the people that joined our CSA last year thought their household spending actually decreased. And through our CSA program, people get a harvest newsletter delivered to their inbox each week with recipe tips and storage tips for what they might not be able to eat in any given week. And the food they're getting is so fresh that it can last quite a while. So those are some theories as to how people might be saving money being part of a CSA. Also, just being inspired to do more home cooking. If you got a fridge full of veggies, you're gonna be inspired to use that and cook up those meals and to use that up since you've already got it. So I think those are some of the ways I feel like CSAs can really promote people's food literacy skills by really educating them through what it is that grows really well here, which we do through our educational programs, and how they can grow those things ecologically, which I think really could contribute to long-term food security if more of our food was grown this way. And then also just those skills of how to eat and get the most value out of your veggie boxes, eating radish top greens and turnip top greens, that sort of thing. So that's how some of the work that we're doing at Farmers on 57th and how we're hoping we're contributing to food security for the folks that are able to come through our programs and just generally increasing people's skills in the community around food and food system literacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. It's really inspiring to see all of the work that you're doing. And so I pass it off to Jacob. If you're welcome to unmute yourself and share your screen with us.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I'm just going to get ready to share my screen. Good to see everybody here. Really cool to see the diversity and where people are from. Really, really amazed. Okay, so I'm just going to click share here. And everybody see that all right? Hopefully. My name is Jacob Beaton. I own and operate with my wife and family Tea Creek Enterprises. My tribal name is Japafgatwinskik. I am Luxkeek, which is Eagle clan from the Gisbakloets tribe, which is northwestern British Columbia, coastal First Nation. I live in Gitxsan territory, and a lot of our partnerships and the work we do are with Gitxsan people. We speak a similar language or in the same language group and very similar culture, so it kind of feels like home here, even though I'm not quite at home culturally. So we're pretty much brand new. We started our farm 2.5 years ago. We moved here. We bought a piece of property that had been sitting fallow for over 10 years, completely abandoned. Our initial plan was to homestead and just grow food essentially for ourselves and for our kids' future. That changed to drastically with COVID. And I'll try and tell a little bit of that story as we go along here. So we are located 1,200 kilometers north by car from Vancouver. I have lived in Vancouver a couple times, and we are pretty far. We're way up there, but I know that a lot of us are farmers and kind of farm nerds. So by zone, we're not that different. Even though we're far up north, we're a Zone 5 AB. We can grow a lot of warm weather fruits and crops here that you can't grow a little further inland. We're in sort of the sweet spot between the zones 8 on the coast, where you don't really have a lot of soil, but you've got mild climate all year, and then the really cold interior upper plateau climate zones that definitely are a little hardier. So we're in this real sweet spot. We actually have 3 totally unique climate zones overlapping here. We have the coastal climate zone, so everything that grows on the coast grows here, including all the Okanagan varieties of fruits. People can grow grapes here, sweet apples, the whole shebang. Plus, we have an Arctic climate zone that comes in for a bit of the winter, and so we have some Arctic vegetation that's pretty neat. And then the interior climate zones, we got all the pine trees and stuff along with the cedars and the firs and the spruces, and it's really diverse and a fun place to live. Yeah, so we run a training farm that we just started. You know, our vision is resilient, healthy, local Indigenous communities built on land-based programs and abundant local food. I do encourage checking out our Instagram and our Facebook page. We post a lot of photos there. Actually, we've been posting daily photo galleries for the last 2 months. We launched our first training program and documented it visually. Food security is a major issue, you've probably heard, up in the north. I just wanted to chat really quickly about this. The way that food security tends to be addressed here in our part of the world is that more money gets thrown at people to go temporarily buy more food, or people go and organizations go and purchase food from somewhere and distribute it. These are all very temporary Band-Aid relief things. And with COVID, what we saw basically is that people who could afford to become more food secure, like could go and buy things out of the grocery store, did. And the people who couldn't became more food insecure. Our region is the poorest in British Columbia. Our average household income here, we're a vastly majority Indigenous population. Our area population is 10,000 people. Over 80% of that is Indigenous. The average household income ranges from $13,000 a year to $20,000. It's incredibly low. So people here can't afford to just go and stock up on food. So what we've decided to focus on, rather than sort of compete with sort of various food security initiatives, we decided to really focus on food sovereignty. And the first idea of food sovereignty is it's about local policies and control over food related policy, as well as putting a value on people, knowledge, training, and we basically adopted this model that came out of this declaration in Africa from 2007 from the Forum of Food Sovereignty in Mali. And it basically listed these sort of pillars of food sovereignty, such as focusing on the value of food, food providers, localizing food systems, putting control of food policy locally, building knowledge and passing it on. And then another really important one is working with nature, not against it, you know, rather than trying to create dependencies on food systems that are reliant on these crazy inputs that have to come from far away. Look at what you already have in your backyard and work with it rather than trying to create something brand new or fighting against your climate or your weather patterns. What we also found with food sovereignty is, man, it's just this perfect meeting point for a whole bunch of really valuable things, which includes culture and cultural safety, mental, spiritual, emotional health. So I actually got into gardening for my own mental health. I'm a CPTSD survivor. I still go to therapy once a week just to keep myself functional. But I come from a very residential school trauma affected family. And I found that the gardening was just incredibly helpful for me to have my hands in the dirt. So while I was doing all this high-end consulting and being this executive flying around, I'd go home and get my hands in the dirt to kind of keep myself sane and healthy and alive, basically. So it's got that benefit. There's also the physical benefit of just being on your feet and walking and moving your body. And then of course, and then this other one is skills building. So learning, you know, farming is, oh my goodness, it's such a high skill thing. You know, you need to know a lot about a lot of different things, from you know, plumbing to electrical to carpentry to soil science, and it's just it's really quite incredible. You know, plants and it's just a really great place to learn and expand your horizons. The other thing I want to talk about is that we actually do focus a lot on food production. So we do believe it's important to grow a lot of food, and I say that because a lot of I see food security stuff in our area. that really doesn't focus on the food for some reason. It's like, oh, let's put in a couple garden boxes. And there's a study out of Toronto that I found the University of Toronto, that I found fascinating, where it basically said that these community gardening initiatives, they produce so little food that they're not actually impacting food security for people who are low income. So what we wanted to do is go, hey, how can we grow a huge abundance of food to actually start displacing the reliance on expensive food that comes from the grocery store? And so we made that really a core of what we're doing here. So just a few minutes about this, our approach. I added a few slides while I was listening to the intro. This is one of them I added just for some context. Our farm is 160 acres, and it breaks down. We have 10 acres of old hayfield that we've been gradually converting over to food production. And we have approximately 100 acres of old pasture that's now turned back into forest. And it's hilly. So we can't do industrial type farming because it's too hilly for that. We don't have big flat open fields. But it leads to a lot of kind of beautiful creative farming. So just to quickly run through our operation, we have 1/16 of an acre of high yield salad greens. This field just went absolutely gangbusters last year. It way overproduced. We had to lop 20 feet off every bed and slice 4 or 5 feet down the middle to cut production. We did free food giveaways all through the summer. We basically said, come and take as much as you can carry. We did that all summer long. So we got many thousands of pounds of vegetables off this field. The next field is a half acre of higher yield, longer dates to maturity crops that are grown using hand mulch and transplant methods. This field again did really well. We were pessimistic on our yield projections, and this one again just completely blew our projections out of the water. We did all drip tape irrigation. Took quite a bit of time and labor to get it in, but almost no weeding, which was really critical for sort of the feasibility of this, making it affordable. This is another picture of the same half acre field, about roughly half, I think this is in June. So we haven't had the full field planted, the full half acre planted yet. And then lastly, last year we did a half acre tractor farm, farmed longer date to maturity crops as well. We weeded the field with the tractor. A part of our approach here is we're not trying to preach or become like some religious group that says you have to be permaculturists or you have to be tractor farmers or you have to be aquaponics people. Like we want to say, hey, here's a whole variety. Like we want to do terracing, we want to do hugels, we want to basically try and test and innovate on all of these proven methods. We're really excited to actually start with a Korean natural farming field this year and see how that goes because, hey, they feed a lot of people in Asia on not a lot of land. And I think we've got a lot to learn from that part of the world. So hopefully to do that, we're going to do that this year. This is actually a photo from just the other day. We're erecting our a permanent greenhouse and we're hoping to maybe do another one by the end of the season. This is what they look like inside. We're building them with locally milled wood, which is 1/5 the cost of lumberyard wood right now. So in summary, we basically, when we're working with our First Nations partners, we're saying, hey, what's your scenario? What do you want to do? Do you want to be commercial? Are you just wanting to be like a break even or not for profit, grow lots of food and give it away to your community? And then where's your resource level at? Like if you got a whole bunch of money and you're really challenged environment, you might want to look at indoor and climate controlled growing. If you don't have a lot of money, you might want to look at the hand gardening approaches. So I know we're at the topic CSA, so I'm just going to wrap up by talking about our plan, which is we did gift boxes last year. Here's some photos of them. We gifted as much of our production as we could, actually it was 90% that we gifted into the Indigenous community up here. So that was thousands of pounds of food, probably around, I don't know, ballpark 10,000 pounds. And that was part of our plan from the beginning. We didn't plan on being a commercial farm. We actually planned on becoming a training farm and gifting our produce. Unfortunately, the funding didn't come through for the training farm, so it's a good thing I didn't quit my day job. But everything else went according to plan. So we're different. Obviously, we're very rural. We're in a very low income area. We work almost entirely with Indigenous people from our region. And we did not expect this, but we gifted And we sort of unintentionally ended up in the gift economy, which turns out is a very robust thing here. So we had, this was a family from the coast that came to harvest twice, and then they just showed up with fresh salmon and gifted it to us. And it was just, we cried, right? Like, because we were looking at the salmon going, my goodness, like if we'd sold our vegetables, we'd be able to buy maybe one, and then they came and gifted us quite a few. So that thing happened, kind of thing happened over and over again. We gift into this economy, and then people would just show up whenever they had a surplus. We got like half a smoked moose donated to us. We got cod, we got all the seafood. People, if they heard we needed something, like somebody said, do you need tarps? And I was like, yeah, actually, I was about to go buy some more tarps. And then they said, oh, so-and-so has extras, and they came over and gave us tarps. So all these things we didn't have to pay cash for, and I'm actually getting goosebumps talking about it. And we were just completely blown away. So yeah, not a model that necessarily works everywhere. And we didn't really intend, we didn't go into this going, oh yeah, we're going to give away this much food and we're going to get this much in return. We didn't have that expectation. It just sort of happened. And it's part of the culture here. We also went to farmers markets. I'll mention that. We, again, we're targeting low income. So we followed this model where you just bring a mountain of produce and you sell it for maybe a little less than you normally would. Last couple things, and that is that we actually got the attention of local politicians, which is really cool. So both our provincial and federal came to the farm last year, got a tour, and were really blown away. Very supportive of our model and our vision and what we're trying to do. Also, we successfully displaced. So our target was basically what is really easy to grow here that costs a lot at the store. And we went in and researched that ahead of time. Oh, I don't know how this slide got in there. Hang on. This is not for you guys. This is uh-oh, glitch. I'll just manually advance it here. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to jump back here. Okay, so we actually displaced 16 linear feet of the grocery store produce section with our vegetables, which I thought was a huge success. And we did that all through the whole growing season. So that was really cool. So just lastly, we do training, as I mentioned. We've broken down our training into 4 main quadrants. So we have farm administration, we've got nutrition and hosting, basically keeping people fed and healthy and the place clean and organized. We've got our builders, that's me. I'm a builder, I build things. And then we've got our growers, which is my wife, she grows things. So so that's basically how we break people down and we allow them to try different things out and kind of find where they fit. And again, that's a very Indigenous approach, the belief that people have natural abilities and you shouldn't necessarily force everybody to do things they don't want to do. Find what the people are gifted at and what they really want to do and really let them immerse themselves and be mentored in that area. So we've had some really great, phenomenal success stories. We just completed a 2-month Indigenous Youth Works program. We fundraised all the money ourselves. And yeah, we've got basically this lady here had never driven before, never had a job before, and she just came in and blew everybody away. She picked everything up very quickly and it gained a lot. This is the last slide, I believe, 3-stage plan. So our basic idea here is we got inundated with requests to help communities get farms going with COVID. And we were like, we can't, we're only a small handful of people. We need to train a lot of people. So that's stage 1 of our plan is basically, we need to train people. And then stage 2 is really focusing on that food production, like getting the production up so we can start displacing all this imported, expensive, not very good food, as much of it as we can. And then stage 3 is really like the marketing, mentorship, and business coaching, and even like setting up co-ops, working together, trying to decrease the cost of our inputs, things like that. So that's it. Thanks for your time. And again, we got a website, a whole bunch of photos and information up there. If you want to dig around, there's like podcast interviews with us and stuff like that with more information on our backstories. So thank you very much. Awesome.
Thanks so much, Jacob. You're doing really incredible work, and thank you for sharing all of that with us. So I think we're just going to open it right up into a question and answer session. So I think if folks really want to just go ahead and start asking questions. You can feel free to maybe like put your hand up, so we kind of have an order in the works, or you can ask them in the chat, and I can go ahead and just ask both Karen and Jacob some questions. So yeah, I see some people throwing resources in the chat, which is really great. Yeah, feel free. Like, does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask a question? Not seeing anyone volunteering, and that's totally fine. Yeah, feel free to just pop questions in the chat then, and I can go ahead and ask them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
I'm super interested in everything that you're saying about being able to do like really high yield and give so much away. That's really incredible. I'm wondering like how you mentioned funding, but like how are you supporting that financially so that you don't have to be selling the produce and you can give it away?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I assume that's for me because I mentioned that. I know Karen also volunteer run, so maybe Karen, you could take a turn after I answer it from my perspective. So like I said, I didn't quit my day job last year. I was a business consultant, and I was making good money, thankfully. And that was our, I basically continued that until November. And then a few months ago, we went all in on the training farm, and we actually raised money, significantly less income than sort of my day job, but enough for us to make ends meet, my wife and I and our family. And the route for the fundraising, so I'll explain this really quickly. Instead of going after like agriculture money, which tends to not be very much of it out there, and you need to do a lot of work to get it, which is frustrating. I actually targeted training money. So there's my philosophy in business, and I've been in business my whole life, is sometimes when you see something not being done well, like you just need to convince the customer that you're a better home for that money. And what's happening up in our neck of the woods is there's a lot of money for training and retraining Indigenous people, and it's going to mainstream organizations that do a really poor job of recruiting, retaining, and supporting Indigenous people in that training. So our whole pitch, and what got the politicians really excited, is that we have a culturally supported outdoor environment that is safe and supported. We feed people here, we make sure they get a ride if they don't have a ride. So there's a lot of things that we go out of our way to make sure that when people participate, they have the maximum chance to succeed and be safe. So I don't know if that answers your question, but our funding actually was just regular old training money that might normally go to a college to train somebody how to do carpentry. But instead of training them in a classroom environment, we're training them on our farm. And we think we're doing a much better job, and apparently the funders think so too. So we're going to keep at it.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about how we make things work at Farmers on 57th. So we're a nonprofit organization, and we're in our 12th year of production now. And it's taken us quite a while to get to the point where we are now, where we're producing enough food and selling it at a price point of $640 a share, and able to sell 70 shares. It's the majority of our income, and basically each of the programs that I talked about are now able to operate discreetly. So all to say that our market garden and our CSA sales pays for myself and another part-time employee who's here actually, Nico, so we're both doing part-time hours on the farm and supporting the volunteers that come to work on the farm. So it is interesting being in the agricultural industry, where we're selling food into a market that's flooded with quite cheap food here in the city. And so what we're trying to cultivate with what we're doing is to help people kind of think about their budgeting and how they're spending their food, or their food money. And if they are able to spend it with us, they're supporting lots of people gaining agricultural skills, like Jacob's talking about, like really yeah, training people up on how to be more agricultural in their lives. And we also, yeah, a lot of people like the fact that we can recruit 20 volunteers to come and grow this food with us, and many of them coming back multiple years. They really enjoy it. We have a cohort of retired people that want to be outside with people, doing exactly what we're doing. And so for us to be able to pay our part-time staff and then benefit from these volunteers that are definitely improving their mental health by being with us and growing food for their community, that's how we're making the whole thing float. The Grow Your Own Food course, that's another, it's a good, we've gotten it to a point this year where we're actually, part of the educational proceeds, the course fees are going to go towards making one of our CSA shares available for some folks that wouldn't otherwise access veggies from a farm like us in the community. So we're also trying to work with other organizations like the Growing Eden program that I talked about. That is funded by the Unitarian Church community, and very much the people that have been involved in the market garden that work with us in the fields are part of that community as well, and they're supporting this program that then makes these gardening spaces and the food coming out of them available to the folks in Southeast Van. So, and then our Garden Club program is now, it originally was funded by Van City and a bunch of like initial kind of capital funders, but by proving the program and the benefits to the residents of George Pearson, it's now funded by the actual facility. So it's become a recreational programming that's on the budget line of a residential, long-term residential healthcare facility. So, and I think there's just, in talking with some of the agencies in our community that are seeing, like they get excited when they hear about people starting new community gardens and having those available to people. I think there's partnerships in our future to really get more people involved in accessing land and growing food, and developing those farm to table skills that come together when people garden in community and learn about food all together.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that. And thank you for that question, Erin. I can see that Katie sort of had a follow-up question. They ask, I'm curious if folks on the webinar are receiving funds from nonprofits, government, private donors to provide food boxes for folks. That is, fixing food insecurity issues shouldn't be farmers' responsibilities. So if there's any follow-up to that, yeah, please feel free to speak to that. Or if anyone else, I can see some people answering in the chat, which is really great as well.
I'll add a tiny bit more, Emily. One thing we used to be called Tea Creek Farm, and our logo had Tea Creek Farm. We actually removed farm and changed it to Tea Creek Enterprises because we ran into a lot of bias against farmers and farms when it comes to funders. You know, the age-old stereotypes of, you know, farmers being stupid or something, and you're not smart enough to do anything else to become a farmer, which is like the absolute opposite of reality. But you know, we can't do much about stereotypes, and it takes a long time to educate everyone. So we actually changed a lot of our language towards funders. We actually removed farming altogether from a lot of our funding applications. And one thing we're trying to do is just starting to define food sovereignty in the way that we want it defined, Indigenous food sovereignty, and that includes, rightfully so, all kinds of training, land-based training. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that. It's kind of like when it comes to presenting to our funders, a lot of it is, hey, we got this great new way of land-based training, culturally safe, and oh, by the way, we're going to just produce a whole bunch of food, and everybody thinks that's super cool. But if you go out and you say, hey, we're going to be a training farm, or we're going to be a farm where people come and learn, they'll be like, yeah, no, sorry, see you later. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that note. Yeah, farmers are some of the most intelligent and resilient people I know. So it's a crazy stereotype. Yeah, so if anyone else wants to jump in and ask a question, feel free to do so. I have a couple questions if no one's gonna jump in. I'm curious to hear sort of how, like, you both run these really fantastic programs, and I'm just curious to hear how some of those changed during the pandemic, what that looked like for you, and yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so the pandemic did change. It was a very stressful time in March 2020 when everything was coming down the line. We were just about to launch all our programs. We did actually, because we're on the grounds of a long-term residential healthcare facility, we had some of our growing space cordoned off because our gardens our market garden are in between the wards of this hospital, and one of the wards actually got changed into a COVID recovery ward. So the gates went up around our community garden area and where we do our grow your own food course, and we were just not, basically for a while we're like, could we go ahead with it even before the gates went up? It was going to be hard to do what we normally do, which is, in large groups of people, coaching people through the growing season. But we were trying to figure out ways to do that. But then when the gates went up, well, that was the end of that. And it was that was stressful because the Grow Your Own Food course is one of our revenue sources, and then at the same time, we were actually, it was the first time that we sold out of our CSA shares in I think it was a month and a half earlier than we'd ever sold out of them before. So we actually what we were able to do was kind of redirect our efforts towards just growing more food. Definitely, like, people were stressed out and they were panic buying our CSA shares, and we were like, okay, we're ready for you. We want to be able to bring you into this food growing community and dole out as many vegetables as we can. And by being able to bring on more CSA members, we were able to bring Nico on for more hours to be able to provide that food, and then also maintain our urban farming learning program with the volunteers that help us grow the food. And that was a really important thing for a lot of the people that grew with us last year. It was, a safe place to be in the outdoors, and to come and grow food and to bring that food home to cook at and enjoy. So we were definitely impacted by COVID, and we definitely had to scale back on the indoor programs. Like community kitchen wasn't able to happen last year. In fact, a lot of garden club was canceled with the residents just because of concerns with such a vulnerable population, and that was really hard to see. A lot of the folks in that facility were shut down, like they were locked in, and we would see their families come and waving at them through the windows, and it was heartbreaking. But also, when we did have the chance to chat with folks, they were just so happy to see us all out on the lawns and doing our thing, and at least that was normal still. And they were able to really, like, the therapeutic benefits of looking out your window and seeing things grow and come to life through the course of a season was really nice for them and for us and the volunteers that were able to join us last year.
Yeah, my answer to that is we got hit really hard by COVID impacts up here. Not sure if you're aware, not many people are, it didn't really make the news, but on top of being the poorest part of BC, we were the hardest hit in the last wave of COVID. Our local community, probably full quarter of the population got COVID, including us and our family. And that's despite staying on the farm. We hadn't left the farm since November. But you know, again, kind of going along with poverty and just not having the resources to stay at home necessarily, or you know, need to support each other. Like it was really, really hard here in this last wave. Really devastating. We lost a lot of people too, including some young people and elders. One of the communities we worked with lost half their elders in the last COVID wave, including the last language speaker. Like absolutely freaking devastating. So there's that impact, the actual COVID viral impact and the devastation it carries. But before that, we had all kinds of craziness. We ordered seeds and seed stock ahead of time and then got shorted. We had month-long delays and just transportation delays because the transport system was so overstressed. And low capacity. So we were ordering things like, just our inputs like irrigation supplies, landscape fabric, low tunnels, things that you normally would take a few weeks to get here took 3 or more months. But yeah, the seeds were really, really tough for us because we had ordered and we'd done our crop plan. And then in Canada, the Canadian seed sellers did a horrible job handling the pandemic pressure. Absolutely horrible. We normally order through West Coast Seeds, and it took 6 weeks to get us our seed order that we ordered before the pandemic. And I kept contacting them, going like, "We're commercial growers. Like stop selling the stuff to the home growers who are hoarding. Like you need to prioritize the farmers." Whereas Johnny Seeds in the United States did a much better job, where we're registered with them as a commercial grower, and they were shipping our orders within days and getting to us. So that was one of the impacts. Is we would like to support our Canadian suppliers, but they did a terrible, horrible job of prioritizing food producers in the pandemic. And I would say that universally, every single supplier we had. We tried to support local businesses as well for supply, and we just had crazy, like shipments go missing. Like we ordered a ton of sprinklers from a supplier out of Vancouver. We thought it would get here quicker because it was Vancouver. It took forever and eventually was listed as lost, and we had to reorder it from Ontario, which took 3 months. So we were without sprinklers for the first critical part of our growing season for our expansion. So it was an utter nightmare, but it really underlined the importance of food sovereignty, like that we need to reduce our external inputs and reliances on external inputs. But really crazy things like here, we had to import our own compost. My goodness, there's no local compost supply and so what we did last year is we started creating our own mini compost facility, and we really want to expand that. So anyway, so that's just a little snapshot of it. The other one, of course, is farm, like helpers on the farm. I should mention that, and that'll be the last thing I'll say about COVID impacts. Is we couldn't get our training farm off the ground partly because of COVID concerns and funding taking a very long time to move. So we ended up with this silver lining with volunteer workers through the WOOF program. We had a farm profile and had zero interest for 2 years, and then all of a sudden we were inundated with all these poor folks who got stuck in BC with nowhere to go, couldn't go back home. And so they all sort of seemed like a lot of them found their way to WOOF. So we had a lot of woofers staying with us. That was an amazing experience. We treated them really well. They treated us really well. All kinds of crazy stories. Actually, one of them has still not been able to make it home to Germany. He came here as a tourist, and each time he has his flight booked to go back to Europe, next COVID wave hits BC and they shut down all the flights. So he just messaged me yesterday. He's like, "I think I'm just going to apply for residency." I think I'm going to stop trying to go home. So anyways, that's some of our experience with COVID, and it definitely left some scars, no question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing. And just a follow-up question, actually, Jacob, regarding food security, are you already or planning to save your own seeds?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I see that question. That's a really good one. Yeah, so there's another group here in our region that started, and I've been sort of advising them. And my understanding is they got funded, and so they're going to start a mobile seed processor. The issue that we have is that we're one of only a very small handful of farms in our region. We really want to get back to so back up a second. I actually wrote this on a sticky note about Indigenous food. So a lot of people don't know this, including myself. I went through the mainstream school system, and it was one of the most damaging myths that I learned in school is that Indigenous people were hunters and gatherers, and that farming was a European introduction. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, even our region, Indigenous people were farming here prior to European arrival. And that's evidence of our foods that all have Indigenous origin. So I had Indigenous youth here the other day who've really been, like me, disconnected from this history. And they're feeling a bit weird about, farming and agriculture. And so we just had a circle and we talked about it. And I just said, like, here's the legume family and the entirety of our fresh and dried, the beans that we eat, vast majority of them come from the Americas. We're cultivated over thousands of years and domesticated by Indigenous people. Number one crop in the world is corn, domesticated over thousands of years of intentional farming, generation after generation, taking a head of grass this big and turning it into corn. And then just going through that list, right? Like, and that doesn't just stop at like the southern central Americas. Up here, there were a number of farmed crops that have gone extinct or nearly gone extinct because the farming practices have been removed. And then the next question is, well, how did that happen? Well, in Canada, it was illegal for First Nations Indigenous people to own private land privately. So the Indigenous farmers were removed at gunpoint from their farmlands. And then those farms were handed over or sold off to non-Indigenous people. In fact, you couldn't own businesses if you're Indigenous. You couldn't leave an Indian reserve. When I went down to the United States when I was 14, I had to get a letter of permission from the Department of Indian Affairs to cross the border. And that is still technically the law today. You have to have an Indian agent sign off on your permission to leave a reserve. So even though these laws aren't really enforced anymore, they still exist in Canada. And that dispossession of farmland happened here, and it was documented and was a critical part of the Delgamuukw court case, which was a landmark Indigenous land rights court case in Canada, was the forced removal of Indigenous ranching and farming families in order to pay soldiers returning from the Boer War and the First World War who were promised farmland if they went and fought. Where'd they get the farmland? They got it from Indigenous people in this part of the world. So, big myth that needs to be busted is that Indigenous people were not agrarian or not farmers. They were for many thousands of years. In fact, I was just reading on Wikipedia, the squash family started cultivating. There's no more wild varieties. Indigenous people in the Americas started cultivating the cucubids and squash family 10,000 years ago. Completely blew me away. I told the Indigenous youth it was 5,000. I went on Wikipedia and I'm like, oh, I was wrong. It was actually 10,000 years. That's a really long time to be intentionally cultivating a food group. So seed saving, yeah, absolutely. We really want to do that. We're starting from way behind zero right now, though. All this farmland in our valley, there was over 700 acres of Indigenous active farms that's now down to zero, and it's been zero since the 60s, maybe earlier. So we literally don't have, like, for example, we don't have a barn to dry plants in and get seeds out of. So there's a lot of like these really simple, we were the only tractor around. And we still are. So there's a lot of very, very basic things like assumptions that people make. And that's what I've been working on with the seed saving group, is saying, okay, one assumption we can't make is that people are mobile here, because they're not. In our last program, out of 78 Indigenous people in our program, only 5% had a vehicle that operated and was insured and with a driver's license. 5%. Okay, so their idea was to build a seed processing facility in a central location and have all these Indigenous people drive in with their plants and dry them and put them through the processor. And I just said, are you guys, like sniffing glue. Like, that's not going to happen. You're going to build a big expensive seed processor and facility and nobody's going to show up. They can't. So we shifted that to a mobile seed processor. So that's one little thing that's being worked on in this area, but we've got a long way to go. No joke, right? Even here on our farm, very, very limited, but we're working on it. We do have plans to build barns and have places where we can dry and process seeds in the future, 100%.
Awesome, thanks. And actually, you ended perfectly for a question that I was hoping to ask you to end this portion of the webinar, and which was, I was hoping maybe you could both just speak to what your kind of future plans are, and if you have like expansion plans for your programs, or kind of what your hopes and dreams are for years down the road. Maybe yeah, you could both speak to that.
Yeah, it's a it's a good question. We're into our 12th year, and we're constrained by the amount of land that we have access to immediately on the grounds of George Pearson Center. One of the ways that we could think about expanding is by further intensifying what we grow. I was talking with Jacob before we all came together here as a group, and about like the early season extension and how we could invest in fabrics and low tunnels to really get a jump on the season. Currently we don't do a ton of winter farming, but it's also like after the windstorm on Sunday and going through Instagram and seeing people's pictures of plastic and frames all kind of discombobulated by the windstorm, I feel like at a certain point we're getting to what we can do with the amount of land that we have. Long term, actually, the whole property that Vancouver Coastal Health used to own, it was sold to an organization called ANI, a multinational development company, and they're slowly converting this 27-acre property into market condos, and we'll be building units for the residents of George Pearson that folks will be moving into through the different phases of construction. But one of the successes we've had is that we got a 1-acre farm into the future plans of that site. So, a lot of the work that we're doing at the Urban Farming Society is really trying to bring more farming into the city so people have a chance to see it and appreciate it and get involved if they want to, and then hopefully for that to extend people's appreciation for agriculture done in an ecological way further out into to appreciating our counterparts in more rural areas and the rest of Metro Vancouver. But there's not a ton of space in the city of Vancouver, so we're really trying to do what we can with the spaces that we have, and Farmers on 57th eventually, it was a real possibility that it wouldn't have been able to continue, but because we were on the ground operating since 2009 through this development process of this piece of land, we were able to successfully advocate that an acre be allocated to an urban farm on this piece of property that eventually is going to be owned by the City of Vancouver Parks Board. So that'll be like the first purpose-built urban farm in Vancouver, just to say that like it'll have a permanent home. A lot of the agriculture that happens in the city here, it's, you're talking about stigma and then like this relegation of agriculture to the outskirts or to like temporary lots. That's how it happens mostly here in the city, and we're really advocating for a permanent space for agriculture to happen here. So that's the long-term plan for Farmers on 57th, is to continue to do what we're doing and do it better, and get lots of people coming through our programs, and hopefully spawning new food growing projects all over, and having a really rich urban farm in the middle of this development that inspires just more and more of it in all the various neighborhoods. And I think, you know, one area of expansion is for sure to link up with these organizations that are in relationship with folks that have food insecurity issues, and that somehow we would be able to either make our food accessible to those people somehow, but I think also helping to in the advocacy realm, and even in the conversations that we're having within our farm community, talking about, you know, how a lot of people need support, and I think with our efforts and creating a community that's interested in long-term food security and the well-being of each other, that we would that we discuss, you know, better income supports for people, and like shift people's minds toward that more kind of giving and caring community, away from this like market-based agriculture, like really trying to, through our CSA and our relationships with our members, trying to shift people's perspectives on what food is and how they want to relate to it, and how they want to relate to the people that grow it. And so nothing really concrete for future plans for Farmers on 57th, besides like populating this 1 acre farm in the middle of a development, but hopefully some more work around community building and working towards creating access for the people that need the food the most.
So just the question was the future, right? Next plans, or yeah. So for us, that's a really hard one, because there's a lot of we're kind of what's the word, you know, overwhelmed with choice, I guess, in what we could be doing. And one thing, I mean, what we really hope will happen this year is that we're going to run our first few training programs, Indigenous food sovereignty training programs, through an actual growing season. This last one we did was in the winter, so we're excited to do it in the growing season. We have 3 different First Nations partners signed up to participate in that this year. Beyond, just within this year, we're looking at adding more infrastructure, kind of across the board. So that's just like basics, like power hookup, water. Oh, thank you. Just had dinner delivered. Yeah, so power, water, like I mentioned, we're going to build some basic shelters, just really simple things, folks. Like, we don't have enough washrooms, so we're adding outhouses, you know. And then we don't have accommodations is a big barrier that we have. There's the lack of housing is a huge issue up here. So we're going to work with a carpenter and build some tiny houses, like some self-sufficient tiny houses, cabins that we're going to sneakily put on our farm, which we're not supposed to because we're an ALR, but we'll figure something out. Yeah, so that's some of the immediate plan. And then further down the road, we aren't sure, you know, we're still not sure if the training farm thing is really going to work, if we're going to be able to have reliable, committed funders long term. If not, we have backup plans. You know, we can always go back to homesteading if we really had to, but we don't think we will have to. We think that there's enough going on here. The other thing we're looking at is commercial partnerships, which is an interesting thing, because what's happening is a lot of First Nations here are very serious about food security and getting their own food production going. And they're looking typically at partners who are very expensive from a long way away, who tend to increase dependency rather than decrease it. So what we've been doing is they've been coming to us and saying, hey, would you work with us instead? So that's a whole other ball game, right? Like looking at helping a partner get a commercial farm up and running, doing business plans, and producing product that will actually end up in their own nation-owned grocery stores, and hopefully non-nation-owned grocery stores as well in our region. So yeah, it's I can just say we're definitely not bored. We're definitely not bored. We got lots going on. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much to you both. And I'm just gonna like wrap up kind of the more formal question and answer part of this webinar. I'm aware that we're well past 7 now. So we can kind of just move into like our after webinar discussion. The last part of the webinar, it's really going to just be a space to like connect further about these topics. It's a place to freely share your thoughts and experiences, additional questions that can be opened up to everyone on the call. Really trying to foster like a discussion. So yeah, so I'm actually just going to stop the recording now.